The morning sun cast long shadows across the mining station on Kepler 442b as Marcus Chun walked the perimeter with his faithful companion, Rex. The German shepherd mix bounded through the red dust, his tail wagging as he chased the strange butterfly-like creatures that fluttered around the communication arrays. Marcus smiled, watching his four-legged friend find joy in this desolate place that had been their home for 3 years. "Come on, boy," Marcus called, patting his leg. Rex immediately trotted back, his tongue hanging out happily. The dog had been Marcus's only real companion since arriving at Mining Station Theta 7, one of humanity's most remote outposts in the Kepler system. The other human workers had rotated out months ago, leaving Marcus as the sole human supervisor overseeing the automated mining operations and the small crew of alien workers. The Zephyrians were decent enough beings to work with. They looked like tall, slender humanoids with pale blue skin and large black eyes that seemed to absorb everything around them. They were efficient workers, rarely complained, and kept to themselves. Their leader, Kethvar, had even learned some basic English to communicate with Marcus. But they didn't understand the bond between a human and his dog. Rex had arrived on the last supply ship 6 months ago, a gift from Marcus's sister back on Earth, who knew how isolated he'd become. The dog had quickly adapted to the lower gravity and thinner atmosphere of Kepler 442b, though Marcus had to keep him on supplements to maintain his health. Rex wore a special collar that monitored his vital signs and provided a small atmospheric enhancement field around his head. As they completed their morning rounds, Marcus noticed something different. The Zephyrians were gathered in small groups, speaking in their musical language that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Their usual work patterns seemed disrupted, and there was tension in the air that Marcus couldn't quite identify. Kethvar approached, his movements more rigid than usual. "Human Marcus," he said in his careful English, "there is a situation requiring discussion." "What kind of situation?" Marcus asked, Rex sitting obediently beside him. "Ship arrives yesterday night. Different Zephyrians from homeworld. They speak of new orders." Kethvar's large eyes seemed troubled. "Orders about animals." Marcus felt a cold chill run down his spine. "What about animals?" "On homeworld, animals serve purpose. Food, work, resources. They say keeping animal for emotion is primitive. Wasteful of resources." Kethvar glanced down at Rex, who looked up at him with curious brown eyes. "They say dog must be processed." "Processed." Marcus's voice rose. "You mean killed? They use word harvested. Say dog meat is nutritious. Say emotional attachment is weakness that makes humans unreliable workers." Kethvar's voice dropped. "I tell them this is human custom, but they say customs must change for greater efficiency." Marcus knelt down and put his arm around Rex, feeling the dog's warm, solid presence. Rex leaned into him, sensing his distress. The thought of anyone harming his companion made Marcus's blood run hot. He'd been alone out here for so long that Rex wasn't just a pet, he was family. "Who are these new Zephyrians?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice level. "Administrative Council from Homeworld. They inspect all outer colonies, make new rules for better productivity. They arrive with enforcement team. Kethvar lu kid uncomfortable. They have authority over all non-Zephyrian workers in this sector." Marcus stood slowly, his mind racing. The Zephyrian Collective had a mutual cooperation agreement with humanity, but humans were definitely the junior partners in the relationship. Earth needed the rare minerals that could only be efficiently mined in this system, and the Zephyrians had the technology and infrastructure to make it possible. Human workers like Marcus were valuable, but replaceable. "When do they want to harvest him?" Marcus asked, the word tasting bitter in his mouth. "Today. Sunset ceremony. They say quick death honors the animal service." Kethvar purse. "I'm sorry, human Marcus. I speak against this, but my voice is small." Marcus looked around the mining station that had been his world for 3 years. The main compound consisted of several connected domes housing living quarters, equipment bays, and processing facilities. Beyond that, The automated mining rigs worked tirelessly, pulling precious metals from the planet's crust. It was efficient, isolated, and about to become a nightmare. "What if I refuse?" Marcus asked. Kethvar's expression darkened. "Administrative Council has enforcement team. Armed. They say resistance will result in termination of human contract and immediate deportation. Or worse, if deemed threat to operation." Marcus felt Rex press closer to his leg, the dog's instincts picking up on the tension. He scratched behind Rex's ears, thinking furiously. There had to be options. He was the human supervisor, responsible for maintaining the complex equipment that the Zephyrians couldn't operate. Surely that gave him some leverage. "I need to speak with these administrators," Marcus said finally. They wait in main dome. "But, human Marcus," Ketvar hesitated. "They are not like local Zephyrians. They are different, more rigid. They see efficiency as highest virtue, emotion as weakness. Be careful with words." Marcus nodded and headed toward the main dome with Rex at his side. As they walked, he thought about his options. The next supply ship wasn't due for 6 weeks. Even if he could somehow get a message to Earth, help wouldn't arrive for months. He was truly alone out here with nothing but his wits and his determination to protect his friend. The main dome's entrance hissed open, and Marcus stepped inside to find 5 Zephyrians he'd never seen before standing around the central holographic display that showed the mining operation status. These aliens were different from the workers Marcus had grown accustomed to. They wore form-fitting dark uniforms instead of the loose work clothes, and their posture was more aggressive, more military. The one in the center turned to face Marcus. This Zephyrian was taller than the others, with intricate scarring around his large eyes that marked him as high-ranking. When he spoke, his English was perfect, without the halting cadence that Kethvar used. "Human Supervisor Marcus Chun," the administrator said in a voice like ice crystals. "I am Subcoordinator Veltar of the Administrative Council. We have reviewed your work performance and found it satisfactory. However, there are inefficiencies in your personal conduct that must be addressed." "Such as?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice steady. The animal. Veltar gestured dismissively toward Rex. "Emotional attachments compromise decision-making ability. Resources allocated to non-productive biological entities reduce overall efficiency. The animal will be processed at sunset, and its nutritional value will be distributed among the workforce." Marcus felt his jaw clench. Rex isn't just an animal. He's my companion. Humans form bonds with dogs that improve our psychological well-being and work performance. Psychological well-being is irrelevant if productivity remains stable, Veltar replied coldly. "We have observed human workers for 17 cycles. Those with emotional attachments to animals show decreased adaptability and increased resistance to necessary changes. The attachment is a weakness." "And what if I refuse?" Marcus asked. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The 4 other administrators moved slightly, and Marcus noticed they all wore what looked like energy weapons on their belts. "Refusal will result in immediate termination of employment and deportation to Earth. The animal will still be processed, as it cannot survive transport and represents a biological hazard to ship systems." Veltar stepped closer, his large black eyes reflecting Marcus like dark mirrors. "Additionally, refusal to comply with Administrative Council directives will result in negative performance ratings that will prevent future employment in collective territories." Marcus realized he was being backed into a corner. Earth's economy depended heavily on the rare metals from this system. A negative rating from the Zephyrian Collective could effectively end his career and make it impossible for him to support his family back home. But the thought of letting them kill Rex made his blood boil. "I need time to consider," Marcus said. "Time is a luxury that reduces efficiency," Veltar replied. "You have until sunset to make arrangements. We suggest using the time to increase productivity rather than dwelling on inevitable outcomes." Marcus turned and walked out of the dome, Rex following faithfully beside him. Once they were outside, he knelt down and looked into his companion's trusting brown eyes. "I won't let them hurt you, boy," he whispered, scratching Rex behind the ears. "I promise." But as he looked around at the isolated mining station, surrounded by alien workers and watched by armed administrators, Marcus realized he had no idea how he was going to keep that promise. The sun was already past its zenith, meaning he had perhaps 6 hours before sunset. 6 hours to figure out how to save his best friend's life on a hostile planet where he was outnumbered, outgunned, and completely alone. Rex wagged his tail and licked Marcus's face, oblivious to the danger. The simple trust in the dog's eyes only strengthened Marcus's resolve. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, he would not let them take Rex from him. As they walked back toward the living quarters, Marcus began to form the outline of a plan. It was desperate and probably suicidal, but it was better than doing nothing. The Zephyrians might think they understood humans, but they were about to learn something new. They were about to discover what happened when someone threatened a human's family. Marcus spent the next hour in his quarters, ostensibly packing Rex's belongings, as the administrators had suggested, but actually planning what might be the most important few hours of his life. His small living space was spartanly furnished: a bed, a desk with his computer terminal, storage lockers, and Rex's bed in the corner with his toys scattered around it. The sight of the worn rope toy and the squeaky ball that had traveled 27 light years from Earth made Marcus's determination burn even brighter. Rex lay on his bed, watching Marcus move around the room with the alert intelligence that had made German shepherds perfect human companions for centuries. The dog sensed something was wrong, but remained calm, trusting in his human completely. Marcus opened his personal storage locker and pulled out items he hadn't touched in months. His grandfather's old tactical knife, a memento from the man's military service. Emergency rations. His portable environmental suit repair kit. Most importantly, his personal communication device, not the standard station equipment, but his own long-range transmitter that he'd brought from Earth. The mining station's computer systems were all networked and monitored by the Zephyrians, but Marcus had administrative access to the mining equipment that even the Administrative Council couldn't override without shutting down the entire operation. That would cost them thousands of credits per hour and likely bring unwanted attention from their superiors. He activated his personal communicator and began composing a message to his sister Sarah on Earth. Even at light speed, it would take the signal over 12 years to reach home, but he had to try. If nothing else, she deserved to know what happened. "Sarah, if you ever receive this, know that I kept my promise to take care of Rex. The Zephyrians want to kill him, and I can't let that happen. I love you. Tell Mom and Dad I'm sorry I won't be coming home." He encrypted the message and set it to transmit on a frequency that wouldn't be monitored by station systems. Then, he turned to more immediate concerns. Marcus had spent 3 years learning every system on mining station Theta 7. He knew the power grid, the life support systems, the mining equipment, and, most importantly, the security protocols. The station was designed to be largely automated, with the alien workers handling routine maintenance, while he managed the complex systems that required human intuition and problem-solving skills. The fusion reactor that powered the station was a marvel of Zephyrian engineering, but it required constant monitoring and adjustment by someone who understood both the technical specifications and the subtle variations that indicated potential problems. Marcus was the only one on the station qualified to manage it. That gave him leverage, but only if he was willing to use it in ways that violated every safety protocol in the book. A soft knock on his door interrupted his planning. "Come in," he called. Kethvar entered, moving with the careful grace of his species. The Zephyrian worker had been the closest thing to a friend Marcus had among the aliens, and the genuine distress in his large eyes was unmistakable. "Human Marcus," Kethvar said quietly, "I bring warning. Administrative Council speaks of making example. They say human emotional attachment is disease that spreads to worker populations. They plan ceremony to show all workers what happens to inefficiency." Marcus felt his blood turn cold. They want to make a public spectacle of killing Rex. They say demonstration of proper thinking. Show workers that attachment to non-productive entities leads only to loss. Kethvar's musical voice carried unusual harshness. Many workers speak against this. We do not understand cruelty without purpose. Is there any way the workers would support me if I resisted? Kethvar was quiet for a long moment, his large eyes studying Marcus's face. Administrative Council has weapons. We are workers, not fighters. But he paused. If human Marcus found way to protect animal without direct confrontation, workers would not report unusual activities. Marcus felt a spark of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. What about the mining equipment? Could there be an accident that required immediate human supervision? Mining systems are delicate. Small malfunction could require many hours of expert attention. Kethvar's expression remained carefully neutral. Such accidents sometimes happen when equipment is overstressed. Marcus nodded slowly. He was beginning to see a possible path forward. Kethvar, I need you to do something for me. In 1 hour, I want you to gather all the local workers in the equipment bay for a safety meeting. Keep them there for as long as possible. This can be arranged. Workers always concerned about safety. Kethvar moved toward the door, then stopped. Human Marcus, Administrative Council will not forget resistance. Even if animal is saved, they will make human life difficult. I know, Marcus replied, but some things are worth fighting for. After Kethvar left, Marcus began implementing his plan. First, he accessed the mining system controls from his personal terminal. The automated rigs were currently pulling precious metals from a deep vein 3 kilometers below the surface. The process required precise coordination between excavation, transportation, and processing systems. Marcus began introducing subtle variations into the mining algorithms. Nothing that would cause immediate catastrophic failure, but small adjustments that would compound over time and create system instabilities. To an outside observer, it would look like normal fluctuations, but Marcus knew that within 2 hours, the entire operation would be on the verge of collapse. Next, he accessed the station's environmental systems. The life support was designed with multiple redundancies, but Marcus knew exactly which backup systems could be temporarily disabled without endangering lives. If he timed it right, the administrators would be dealing with multiple critical alerts right around sunset. Rex wandered over and put his head on Marcus's lap, sensing his human stress. Marcus scratched behind the dog's ears and felt his resolve strengthen. Just a little longer, boy. We're going to get through this. The final part of his plan was the most dangerous. Marcus opened his emergency supply kit and pulled out a small device that looked like a standard environmental monitor. In reality, it was a signal booster he'd built from spare parts, something that could amplify his personal communicator's range considerably. If he could get it to the station's main communication array, he might be able to punch a signal through to the outer system where human patrol ships occasionally operated. The chances of anyone receiving the signal were minimal, but Marcus had learned that desperation could make even minimal chances seem worth pursuing. 2 hours before sunset, Marcus made his move. He clipped Rex's leash to his collar and spoke softly to his companion. We're going for a walk, boy, but this one might be a little different. They left the living quarters and headed toward the mining control center. As they walked, Marcus could see Zephyrian workers moving around the station in their usual efficient patterns, but there was an undercurrent of tension that hadn't been there before. Some of them nodded to Marcus as he passed, small gestures of acknowledgement that meant more than they knew. The mining control center was located in a separate dome connected to the main facility by enclosed walkways. Marcus had designed it that way to isolate the critical systems from the general population areas. As he approached, he could see status lights blinking in patterns he'd programmed hours earlier. Inside the control center, arrays of holographic displays showed the status of mining operations across the planet's surface. Marcus took a seat at the main console and began the next phase of his plan. With careful precision, he began pushing the mining systems beyond their normal operating parameters. Power fluctuations cascaded through the network as excavation rigs drew more energy than the power distribution system was designed to handle. Transportation tubes began operating at speeds that stressed their structural integrity. Processing plants started running thermal cycles that pushed their heat dissipation systems to the limit. Within minutes, the first warning alarms began sounding. Marcus allowed himself a grim smile as he saw what appeared to be system failures cascading across the mining network. To anyone not familiar with the specific technical details, it would look like a complex equipment malfunction requiring immediate expert attention. Rex sat beside Marcus's chair, occasionally looking up at the flashing displays with mild curiosity. The dog had spent enough time in the control center to be comfortable with the electronic environment. Alert! Mining system instabilities detected in sectors 7 through 12. The station's computer announced in its neutral synthetic voice. Human supervision required for diagnostic procedures. Marcus pretended to look concerned as he began running diagnostic routines that he knew would reveal nothing useful. The beauty of his sabotage was that he was the only one who understood the systems well enough to fix them quickly. 10 minutes later, Subordinator Veltar burst into the control center with 2 of his enforcement officers. The Zephyrian administrator's normally composed demeanor showed cracks of irritation. Human Marcus, explain the cause of these system failures, Veltar demanded. Marcus looked up from his displays with an expression of professional concern. I'm still running diagnostics, but it appears to be a cascading power distribution failure. The mining rigs are drawing more power than normal, which is stressing the entire network. How long to repair? That depends on what I find. Could be anywhere from 6 hours to several days if we need replacement components. Marcus gestured to the flashing warning displays. I've had to shut down 3 excavation sites to prevent permanent damage. Veltar's large eyes narrowed. This delay is unacceptable. Production quotas must be maintained. I understand your concern, Marcus replied carefully, but if I rush the repairs and cause permanent damage to the equipment, we could be looking at weeks or months of downtime. The administrator was silent for a moment, clearly calculating costs in his head. The mining operation generated enormous revenue for the Zephyrian Collective, and any significant interruption would reflect badly on his administrative record. You will work continuously until systems are restored, Veltar finally said. The animal processing ceremony is delayed until this crisis is resolved. Marcus felt a surge of relief, but kept his expression neutral. I'll need to monitor the systems around the clock. Any interruption could cause the failures to cascade into catastrophic damage. Understood. You will remain here until normal operations are restored. Veltar turned to leave, then paused. Do not think this delay changes the eventual outcome, Human Marcus. The animal will be processed when systems are stable. After the administrators left, Marcus allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He bought time, but he hadn't solved the fundamental problem. The mining systems couldn't stay in their current unstable state indefinitely without causing real damage that would take weeks to repair. Rex wandered around the control center, sniffing at equipment housings and eventually settling down near Marcus's feet. The dog seemed content to be wherever his human was, oblivious to the fact that his life hung in the balance. Marcus began the careful process of gradually stabilizing some systems while maintaining the appearance of ongoing technical difficulties. It was a delicate balance. Too much stability, and the administrators would resume their original timeline. Too much instability, and he might cause actual damage that would ruin everything. As he worked, Marcus kept one eye on the communication console. If his signal booster was working properly, any ships in the outer system might pick up his emergency transmission. The chances were slim, but slim was better than nothing. 3 hours passed. Sunset came and went with the mining systems still showing critical warnings. Marcus allowed himself to hope that he might have found a way to postpone the inevitable long enough to figure out a permanent solution. Then, his communicator chimed with an incoming message. Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he accessed the communication. The message was brief, encoded in standard human emergency protocols, and came from a source he never expected to hear from. Mining Station Theta 7. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the U.S. Determination. Message received. Cavalry is coming. Hold your position. Marcus stared at the screen in shock. Sarah Chun, his sister Sarah, was a ship captain? When had that happened? The message had come from somewhere in the outer system, which meant a human vessel was already in range. He quickly sent back a coded reply. Situation critical. Local authorities hostile. Requesting immediate assistance. As he sent the message, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Real, substantial hope. But he also knew that even if help was coming, he still had to keep Rex safe until it arrived. Marcus stared at the communication display, reading his sister's message for the third time. Sarah had been a cargo pilot when he'd left Earth 3 years ago, flying supplies between the inner colonies. How she'd ended up as captain of what sounded like a military vessel was a mystery, but right now Marcus didn't care about the details. Help was coming. The question was whether it would arrive in time. Rex had fallen asleep curled up beside Marcus's chair, his breathing steady and peaceful. Looking at his companion, Marcus felt a fierce protectiveness that surprised him with its intensity. He'd always loved Rex, but facing the possibility of losing him had crystallized something fundamental about their bond. This wasn't just about saving a pet. It was about protecting a member of his family. A soft chime from the communication console interrupted his thoughts. Another message, this time with technical specifications that made Marcus's heart race. ETA 18 hours. Suggest maintaining current situation until arrival. Do not engage hostiles directly. Repeat, do not engage. We have full authority for extraction operations in this sector. 18 hours. Marcus could probably keep the mining systems in a state of controlled chaos for that long, without causing permanent damage. The bigger problem was the Zephyrian administrators. Veltar wasn't stupid, and he was already suspicious about the convenient timing of the system failures. As if summoned by Marcus's thoughts, the control center door hissed open, and Subordinator Veltar entered with his full enforcement team. The 4 armed Zephyrians spread out around the room, while Veltar approached Marcus's workstation. Human Marcus, I have reviewed the system logs, Veltar said in his icy voice. The failure patterns are unusual. Perhaps you could explain why diagnostic routines show no clear mechanical faults. Marcus felt sweat beading on his forehead, but kept his voice steady. Complex systems sometimes fail in ways that don't show up in standard diagnostics. I'm running deeper analysis protocols, but they take time. Indeed. Veltar moved closer, his large black eyes studying the displays. How fortunate that these mysterious failures occurred precisely when the animal was scheduled for processing. Equipment failures happen, Marcus replied. Usually at the worst possible times. Yes, they do. Veltar gestured to one of his officers, who moved to a secondary control panel. Perhaps a fresh perspective would be helpful. Technician Yelmoth has training in power distribution systems. Marcus watched as the Zephyrian technician began running his own diagnostic routines. This was bad. While the alien might not understand human engineering completely, he would certainly notice the artificial nature of the power fluctuations if he looked closely enough. Actually, Marcus said quickly, I should warn you that having multiple operators accessing the core system simultaneously could cause feedback loops. When the power grid is this unstable, conflicting commands could trigger a complete shutdown. Veltar's expression didn't change, but he held up a hand to stop his technician. How convenient. The human expert advises against allowing others to examine his work. The tension in the room ratcheted up several degrees. Marcus could see the enforcement officers shifting their positions, hands moving closer to their weapons. Rex stirred in his sleep, some instinct alerting him to the danger even in his dreams. I'm trying to prevent a catastrophic failure that would shut down operations for weeks, Marcus said. If you want to risk that for the sake of processing one dog, that's your decision. Wrong thing to say. Veltar's composure finally cracked, and Marcus could see genuine anger flashing in those large alien eyes. You forget your position, human. You are here at our sufferance, managing equipment that belongs to the collective. Your emotional attachment to that animal has clearly compromised your judgment. Veltar stepped closer. Perhaps immediate processing would remove the distraction and allow you to focus properly on your duties. Marcus's hand instinctively moved toward the tactical knife concealed under his jacket, but he forced himself to remain calm. Starting a fight now would only get Rex killed faster. The systems require constant monitoring, he said. If I leave this console for more than a few minutes, the cascade failures could become irreversible. Then, we will bring the animal here. Veltar turned to his officers. Retrieve processing equipment. We will perform the ceremony in this location. Marcus felt his world tilting. They're going to kill Rex right here in front of him while he sat helplessly at the controls. The image of his friend's trusting eyes and wagging tail flashed through his mind, and something cold and hard settled in his chest. I wouldn't do that, Marcus said quietly. You will not do anything, Veltar replied. You will sit at your console and maintain your precious systems while we demonstrate proper resource allocation. No. Marcus stood up slowly, his hand now resting openly on the knife handle. I really wouldn't do that. The enforcement officers raised their energy weapons, the soft whine of charging capacitors filling the air. Rex woke up and got to his feet, sensing the tension and moving protectively close to Marcus's leg. Human, you are outgunned and alone, Veltar said with cold satisfaction. Your emotional attachment has led you to a position where resistance is futile. This is precisely why such attachments are inefficient. Marcus looked around the control center at the flashing displays showing the mining systems he'd spent 3 years learning to manage. At the power conduits running through the walls, carrying enough energy to supply a small city. At the central processing core that controlled everything from life support to communication systems. You're right, Marcus said finally. I am alone, but you're making one critical mistake. Which is? Marcus smiled, and there was something in that expression that made even the armed Zephyrians take a step back. You think this is my prison, Marcus said. But you're wrong. This is my domain, and you just threatened my family and my house. Before anyone could react, Marcus slammed his hand down on the emergency shutdown control for the mining operations. Instantly, every excavation rig, transportation system, and processing plant on the planet went dark. The sudden silence was deafening. You had just cost the collective millions of credits, Veltar snarled. That's just the beginning, Marcus replied. His fingers danced across the control interface, accessing systems that the Zephyrians didn't even know existed. See, I didn't just manage these systems for 3 years. I improved them, enhanced them, added features that aren't in any manual. Warning alarms began sounding throughout the station as Marcus began activating his hidden modifications. Over the years, he'd built backdoors into every major system, partly for maintenance purposes and partly because humans had a natural tendency to want to understand and control their environment completely. For instance, Marcus continued conversationally. Did you know that I can reroute power from the mining systems to overload specific sections of the station's infrastructure? The lights in the control center began fluctuating as power surges raced through the grid. Or that I can lock down all the internal airlocks, dividing the station into isolated sections. Heavy mechanical sounds echoed through the walls as blast doors began sealing automatically. I can even, Marcus said with grim satisfaction, disable the atmosphere processors in specific areas while maintaining life support in others. Veltar raised his weapon, pointing it directly at Marcus. Reverse these actions immediately, or we will kill you and the animal. Go ahead, Marcus said calmly. Kill me. But understand that every system on this station is now running on automated sequences that only I know how to stop. Without me, you'll have approximately 6 hours before the fusion reactor goes into emergency shutdown, the atmosphere processors fail, and everyone on this station dies. Rex pressed against Marcus's leg, and Marcus reached down to scratch behind his dog's ears. The simple gesture seemed to infuriate Veltar even more. You would sacrifice dozens of lives for one animal. I would sacrifice dozens of lives to protect my family, Marcus corrected. The fact that you can't understand the difference is exactly why you'll never really understand humans. The workers, Veltar said. Your friend Kethvar and the others. You would kill them too. For the first time, Marcus hesitated. He hadn't considered the local workers when he'd started this confrontation. They were caught in the middle of something that wasn't their fight. The workers can evacuate to the emergency shelters, Marcus said finally. They have independent life support systems. But the administrative team, he smiled coldly. You're welcome to try to reach your ship before the atmospheric processors fail completely. Veltar's large eyes narrowed as he calculated odds and options. Around the room, his enforcement officers kept their weapons trained on Marcus, but their body language showed increasing nervousness as more alarms joined the growing cacophony. What are your terms? Veltar asked finally. Simple. You and your team leave this station immediately. You report that the mining operations suffered a catastrophic failure that will require extensive repairs. You recommend that this station be abandoned and the human worker transferred to a different location. And in exchange, I restore the systems, everyone lives, and the collective doesn't lose a major mining operation. Marcus paused. And Rex? And I leave on the next transport, no questions asked. Veltar was silent for a long moment, the only sounds in a room being the various alarms and Rex's soft panting. The Administrative Council does not negotiate with terrorists, Veltar said finally. I'm not a terrorist, Marcus replied. I'm just a man protecting his dog. But if you want to call it terrorism, that's fine with me. The results are the same. Another alarm joined the chorus, this one indicating that the fusion reactor was approaching thermal limits. Marcus had programmed the sequences carefully. There was no real danger of a meltdown, but the Zephyrians didn't know that. Decide quickly, Marcus added. Some of these cascading failures become irreversible if they're not addressed soon. Veltar looked around at his officers, then back at Marcus. The human stood calmly beside his dog, one hand on the control interface, the other resting protectively on Rex's head. There was something in Marcus's expression that made it clear he was prepared to follow through on his threats. Very well, Veltar said finally. We will depart. But the Administrative Council will file reports about this incident. Your career in collective territories is over. I can live with that, Marcus said. As the Zephyrian administrators filed out of the control center, Marcus allowed himself to breathe for the first time in what felt like hours. But he wasn't done yet. He still had to maintain the illusion of system failures for 18 more hours until Sarah's ship arrived. Rex looked up at him with trusting brown eyes, tail wagging slightly. What do you say, boy? Marcus asked, scratching behind the dog's ears. Ready to go home? Rex barked once, a sound of pure joy that echoed through the control center. For the first time in hours, Marcus smiled genuinely. But he knew the hardest part was still ahead. The Zephyrians might have retreated for now, but they wouldn't give up easily. And 18 hours was a long time to keep a complex deception running. Still, looking down at Rex's happy face, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the absolute certainty that he was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what needed to be done. The fury that had driven him to this point was transforming into something else, determination, protectiveness, and an unshakable resolve to see this through to the end. The next 12 hours tested Marcus's endurance and technical skills like nothing in his 3 years on the station. Maintaining the illusion of cascading system failures while keeping everything actually functional required constant attention and increasingly creative solutions. Rex remained faithfully by his side, seemingly understanding that this was a time for patience and quiet support. The Zephyrian workers had indeed evacuated to emergency shelters as Marcus had suggested, but Kethvar had remained behind, quietly helping where he could. The alien worker brought food and water, monitored secondary systems, and served as Marcus's eyes and ears throughout the station. Administrative ship departed 2 hours ago, Kethvar reported during one of his visits to the control center. But sensors show they remain in orbital position. They wait. Waiting for what? Marcus asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. For human to exhaust himself, maintaining false emergency. Or for systems to actually fail from constant manipulation. Kethvar's large eyes showed concern. This deception cannot continue indefinitely without causing real damage. Marcus nodded wearily. He'd been thinking the same thing. Some of the power fluctuations he was generating were starting to stress components beyond their normal tolerance levels. In his effort to save Rex, he might end up destroying the very systems that kept them all alive. How much longer can you maintain this? Kethvar asked. Marcus checked his communicator. Still 6 hours until his sister's ship was due to arrive. Long enough, he said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. What he didn't tell Kethvar was that he'd been receiving periodic status updates from the approaching human vessel. The messages were brief and cryptic, but they painted a picture of something much larger than a simple rescue operation. Multiple collective vessels converging on your position. Military escort advised. Situation escalating beyond local incident. Humanitarian extraction protocol authorized. Full diplomatic immunity in effect. Prepare for immediate departure. Bring all essential personnel and equipment. The last message had arrived just an hour ago, and it carried implications that made Marcus's stomach clench with worry. Collective Council formally protests human presence in sector. This may be beginning of larger diplomatic crisis. Stand by for a priority evacuation. Marcus was beginning to realize that his desperate attempt to save Rex might have triggered something much bigger than a simple disagreement between a human worker and alien administrators. The Zephyrian Collective and humanity had maintained an uneasy but profitable relationship for decades. If that relationship was breaking down over a dog, a new alarm interrupted his thoughts. This one wasn't part of his artificial emergency. It was a genuine proximity warning from the station's perimeter sensors. Multiple ships approaching, the station's computer announced. Configuration unknown. Estimated arrival in 30 minutes. Marcus quickly accessed the external sensor array and felt his blood run cold. 7 Zephyrian vessels were approaching the station in a formation that looked distinctly military. These weren't administrative ships or cargo haulers. They were armed cruisers with enough firepower to reduce the mining station to scrap metal. Kethvar, Marcus called urgently. Get down here now. The Zephyrian worker arrived within minutes, took one look at the sensor displays, and made a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. Enforcement fleet, Kethvar said, his musical voice tight with fear. They come to restore order by force. Can they actually attack a civilian mining station? Marcus asked. If they declare human presence a threat to collective security, they can do anything they deem necessary. Kethvar studied the sensor readings. But first they will demand surrender. Give you chance to cooperate voluntarily. Marcus looked down at Rex, who was watching the flashing displays with alert curiosity. The dog had no idea that an entire fleet was approaching to ensure his death, among other things. What about the human ship that's coming? Marcus asked. 1 ship against 7? Kethvar's expression was grim. This will not end well for anyone. Marcus's communicator chimed with an incoming transmission. The message was brief but clear. Collective forces detected. Accelerating approach. ETA now 3 hours. Hold position at all costs. Diplomacy has failed. This is now a rescue operation. 3 more hours. Marcus looked at the approaching Zephyrian fleet and realized he'd run out of time for subtle deceptions. In less than 30 minutes, he would be facing a direct confrontation with overwhelming force. Kethvar, I need you to get the other workers as far from the main facility as possible. Take them to the furthest emergency shelter and keep them there until this is over. What will human Marcus do? Marcus turned to his control console and began entering a series of commands that accessed the station's deepest system levels. Something I should have done hours ago. I'm going to stop pretending this is about mining equipment failures. I do not understand. The Zephyrians keep talking about efficiency and resource allocation, Marcus said grimly. Time to show them what happens when a human decides that efficiency isn't the highest priority. The approaching fleet was still 20 minutes out when Marcus began implementing protocols he'd hoped never to use. Deep in the station's computer core were emergency subroutines designed to protect critical human assets in case of hostile action. They weren't part of the standard mining software. Marcus had written them himself during his first year on the station, when isolation and paranoia had made him imagine scenarios where he might need to defend himself. The mining station's fusion reactor was designed with multiple safety systems to prevent catastrophic failure. But it was also designed to provide enormous amounts of power for industrial operations. With the right modifications, those same systems could be turned into something entirely different. Warning: unauthorized access to reactor control systems, the station computer announced. Marcus ignored the warning and continued entering commands. Around him, the control center's displays began showing power readings that climbed steadily into dangerous territory. Human Marcus, Kefvar said nervously. What are these modifications accomplishing? Insurance, Marcus replied. I'm creating a situation where attacking this station would result in an explosion visible from orbit. You would destroy yourself to protect the animal. I would destroy this entire facility to protect my family, Marcus said firmly. And to make sure the Zephyrians understand what happens when they threaten a human's loved ones. The proximity alarm changed tone, indicating that the Zephyrian fleet had reached communication range. Marcus's console chimed with an incoming transmission on official collective frequencies. Mining Station Theta 7. This is Fleet Commander Zorthak of the Zephyrian Enforcement Division. You will immediately surrender control of all station systems and submit to administrative authority. Marcus activated his communication system and responded calmly. Fleet Commander, this is Mining Supervisor Marcus Chun. I'm currently dealing with critical system failures that require my immediate attention. I suggest you maintain a safe distance until the emergency is resolved. Human Chun, you will comply immediately or face the consequences of resisting collective authority. With all due respect, Commander, the consequences of not complying with your orders are significantly less severe than the consequences of stopping my current work. Marcus gestured to Rex, who was watching the conversation with alert intelligence. And I've got everything I care about right here with me. The transmission went silent for several minutes. Marcus used the time to make final adjustments to his reactor modifications. The fusion core was now operating well outside normal parameters, generating enough excess energy to power 3 mining stations while maintaining the delicate balance that kept it from going critical. Human Chun, the Zephyrian commander's voice finally returned. Our sensors indicate that your reactor is operating in an extremely dangerous configuration. Shut down these modifications immediately. I'm afraid I can't do that, Marcus replied. You see, these modifications are the only thing keeping the reactor stable right now. Any attempt to shut them down, any disruption to station power, any damage to the control systems, and the whole thing goes critical. You are threatening to destroy a valuable collective asset. I'm protecting something infinitely more valuable than any asset, Marcus said, looking down at Rex. I'm protecting my family. Another long silence. Then, Human Shin, you have 5 minutes to surrender before we begin targeted strikes on non-essential station systems. Marcus checked his chronometer. 2 hours and 40 minutes until Sarah's ship arrived. The approaching Zephyrian fleet would be in attack position within minutes. Rex, Marcus said softly, scratching behind his dog's ears. This might get a little rough, but I promise I won't let anyone hurt you. Rex wagged his tail and leaned against Marcus's leg, offering the unconditional trust that had started this whole crisis. Marcus turned back to his controls and began the final phase of his preparations. If the Zephyrians wanted to play games with overwhelming force, he would show them what a desperate human could accomplish with a fusion reactor, a lifetime of technical knowledge, and absolutely nothing left to lose. The proximity alarms reached fever pitch as the Zephyrian ships moved into attack formation. On his displays, Marcus could see weapon systems charging and targeting solutions being calculated. But he also saw something else. A new contact on the edge of sensor range, approaching at a velocity that shouldn't have been possible for any known ship design. His communicator chimed with a familiar voice. "Marcus, this is Sarah. We're coming in hot, and we're bringing friends. Hold on for just a little longer." Marcus smiled grimly and prepared to discover just how far a human would go to protect the ones he loved. #Fury Unleashed. Part 5. The moment Sarah's ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Marcus knew this was no ordinary rescue mission. The U.S. Determination was sleek and massive, bristling with weapon arrays and sensor equipment he didn't recognize. But it wasn't alone. 3 other human vessels materialized alongside it, their hulls bearing the distinctive markings of the Terran Defense Force. Mining Station Theta 7. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the U.S. Determination. His sister's voice came through on official military frequencies. "We are responding to a humanitarian crisis and request immediate cooperation from all parties." The Zephyrian fleet commander responded almost immediately. "Human vessels, you are entering collective territory without authorization. Withdraw immediately or face defensive action." Negative, Fleet Commander. Under the emergency humanitarian intervention protocols established in the Terran Collective Treaty of 2387, we have full authority to protect human civilians in immediate danger. Sarah's voice carried the cold authority of someone accustomed to command. "We also have documentation of threats made against non-combatant biological assets in violation of interspecies welfare agreements." Marcus stared at his communication console in amazement. When had Sarah learned to speak like a diplomat? And how had a simple distress call about Rex resulted in what looked like a small fleet of military vessels? "Additionally," Sarah continued, "we have monitored communications indicating the deployment of military assets against civilian infrastructure. The Collective Council will need to provide explanations for these actions to the Interspecies Relations Committee." Fleet Commander Zorthak's response carried a note of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. "The human worker is in violation of administrative directives and has threatened critical infrastructure. Supervisor Chun is protecting legally recognized companion animals from summary execution, which is his right under both human and collective law," Sarah replied smoothly. "As for infrastructure threats, our sensors indicate that all systems remain stable under expert human supervision." Marcus had to admire his sister's diplomatic skills. She was technically correct. The reactor modifications were maintaining stability, even if they were also creating the potential for catastrophic failure. But the Zephyrian commander wasn't backing down easily. "The Administrative Council has determined that the animal poses a biological and psychological threat to operational efficiency." "Commander," Sarah's voice turned ice cold, "you just admitted on official channels that you deployed military assets to kill a dog. Do you have any idea how that's going to sound at the next Interspecies Relations Committee meeting?" There was a long pause. Marcus could almost hear the wheels turning in the Zephyrian commander's head as he realized the political implications of his words. "Furthermore," Sarah continued, "we have evidence of attempt to coerce human workers through threats against their family members. The Terran Defense Force takes a very dim view of such tactics." Marcus's communicator chimed with a private message from Sarah. "Marcus, we need to get you and Rex out of there immediately. This situation is about to get very complicated, and not just because of one mining station. Can you get to the main landing bay?" Marcus looked around the control center at the displays showing his carefully maintained system modifications, at Rex sleeping peacefully beside his chair despite the chaos around them. "I can't leave," he typed back. "If I stop monitoring the reactor modifications, they'll either fail catastrophically or the Zephyrians will realize they were artificial all along. How long do you need to safely shut everything down? Marcus did some quick calculations. At least 2 hours to gradually return systems to normal without causing actual damage or revealing the deception. We might not have 2 hours. The collective is scrambling additional fleets from 3 systems. This is turning into a major diplomatic incident. Marcus felt his stomach drop. What had started as a desperate attempt to save his dog was now threatening to destroy the fragile peace between humanity and the Zephyrian collective. Sada, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to escalate so far. Don't apologize for protecting your family, came the immediate reply. We knew the risks when we decided to come get you. Just be ready to move when I give the word. On the main communication channel, the diplomatic exchanges were becoming increasingly tense. The Zephyrian commander was demanding that the human ships withdraw, while Sarah was insisting on her right to protect human civilians. Each side was quoting treaty clauses and legal precedents, but Marcus could hear the underlying threat of violence in every transmission. Then, Kethvar's voice came through on the internal communication system. Human Marcus, workers report additional ships approaching. Very large ships. Configuration unknown. Marcus checked the sensor displays and felt his blood turn cold. 6 massive vessels were approaching the system, their designs unlike anything in the Zephyrian or human fleets. These were ships from the hegemony, the loose alliance of alien species that viewed both humans and Zephyrians as dangerous expansionists. Great, Marcus muttered. Now it's a 3-way standoff. As if responding to his words, a new voice entered the communication channels. The synthetic tones of a hegemony AI translator. All vessels. This is Hegemony Fleet Designation Sigma 7. We are responding to reports of aggressive military activity in this sector. All parties will stand down and submit to hegemony arbitration. Sarah's response was immediate. Hegemony Fleet. This is a bilateral humanitarian operation authorized under existing treaties. Your intervention is not required or welcomed. Negative, human vessel. Deployment of military assets in disputed territory constitutes a violation of the Kepler System Neutrality Agreement. All parties will withdraw to minimum safe distance while diplomatic solution is negotiated. Marcus realized that his simple attempt to save Rex had somehow triggered a 3-way interspecies crisis. The mining station was now the focal point of a confrontation between the 3 major powers in this region of space. His communicator chimed with another private message from Sarah. Marcus, we're running out of time and options. I need you to trust me and do exactly what I tell you when I tell you. Can you do that? Of course. Good. When I give the signal, I want you to shut down all your reactor modifications as quickly as possible. Don't worry about the deception. Just get those systems back to normal operation. Sarah, if I do that, the Zephyrians will realize I was bluffing about the system failures. I'm counting on it. Trust me. Marcus looked down at Rex, who had woken up and was watching him with alert brown eyes. The dog seemed to understand that something important was happening. What do you think, boy? Marcus asked quietly, ready to trust Sarah to get us out of this mess. Rex wagged his tail once, as if giving his approval. All right, Marcus said to himself. Let's see how this plays out. On the main communication channels, the 3-way standoff was intensifying. Weapons were being charged, shields were being raised, and diplomatic language was giving way to barely veiled threats. Then, Sarah's voice cut through the tension with a calm announcement that changed everything. All stations, be advised that Mining Station Theta 7 is now under official Terran Defense Force protection as a designated refugee sanctuary. Any hostile action against the station or its inhabitants will be considered an act of war against Earth. Marcus stared at his console in amazement. His sister had just declared a mining station to be sovereign human territory. Furthermore, Sarah continued, the Terran Defense Force is prepared to escort any individuals seeking asylum to neutral territory where their cases can be properly adjudicated. The Zephyrian commander's response was immediate and angry. You cannot simply declare collective territory to be a human sanctuary. Commander, I just did. The emergency humanitarian intervention protocols give me broad authority to protect human civilians and their legally recognized family members. That includes biological companions facing summary execution. The Hegemony Fleet commander chimed in. Human captain, your actions exceed any reasonable interpretation of humanitarian intervention. With respect, Hegemony Fleet, the Terran Defense Force has a long-standing policy of protecting Earth citizens wherever they may be found. We do not abandon our people, and we do not abandon their families. Marcus felt a surge of pride in his sister and in humanity itself. In the face of overwhelming odds, Sarah was taking a stand based on principle rather than pragmatism. His communicator chimed. Now, Marcus, shut down the reactor modifications now. Marcus began rapidly entering shutdown commands, bringing the fusion reactor back to normal operational parameters. Within minutes, the danger readings disappeared and the station's power grid stabilized. Almost immediately, the Zephyrian commander's voice returned. Human captain, our sensors indicate that the supposed system failures on the mining station have mysteriously resolved themselves. It appears your brother was deceiving us about the nature of the emergency. Supervisor Chun was maintaining critical systems under extreme duress while facing threats against his family, Sarah replied smoothly. The fact that he succeeded in keeping everyone alive while under such pressure only demonstrates human technical competence and dedication to duty. He sabotaged collective equipment. He prevented a catastrophic failure that would have destroyed valuable infrastructure, Sarah corrected. I'd say the collective owes him a bonus, not punishment. Marcus couldn't help smiling at his sister's audacity. She was turning his desperate deception into evidence of human heroism. But the standoff was far from over. 3 fleets faced each other in the vacuum around the mining station, each representing species that had been one small step away from war for decades. Then, Rex did something that changed everything. The dog had been listening to the communication chatter with the alert attention he always gave to human voices. Suddenly, he stood up, walked over to Marcus's communication console, and barked, one clear, loud sound that carried across all the open channels. The effect was immediate and profound. On every ship, in every fleet, intelligent beings heard the sound that had accompanied human civilization for millennia. The bark of a dog defending his territory and his family. For a moment, the communication channels went completely silent. Then, Sarah's voice returned, warm and amused. Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Rex, the individual whose life we're here to protect. He's a German Shepherd mix, approximately 4 years old, loyal companion to my brother Marcus for the past year. He enjoys long walks, playing fetch, and meeting new people. He has never harmed anyone, threatened anyone, or violated any laws or regulations. Another pause. This is what you've deployed 3 fleets to deal with, gentlemen. One dog whose only crime was being loved by a human being. The silence stretched longer this time. Marcus could imagine the commanders of 3 different fleets trying to figure out how to explain to their superiors that they'd nearly started an interspecies war over a pet dog. Finally, the Hegemony Fleet commander broke the silence. Captain Chun, the Hegemony accepts your declaration of sanctuary status for Mining Station Theta 7. We will provide escort for any refugees seeking transport to neutral territory. The Zephyrian commander took longer to respond, but eventually his voice returned. The collective acknowledges the sovereignty of the sanctuary area. Administrative personnel will be withdrawn to allow for orderly transition of operations. Marcus felt tears running down his cheeks as he realized they'd actually won. Rex was safe. They were all safe. His communicator chimed with one final message from Sarah. Pack your bags, little brother. You and Rex are coming home. As Marcus knelt down to hug his faithful companion, Rex licked his face with enthusiasm, tail wagging frantically. The dog had no idea that he'd just been the catalyst for a major diplomatic crisis, or that his simple bark had helped defuse a potential interspecies war. All Rex knew was that his human was happy, and that was enough. 6 hours later, Marcus and Rex were aboard the UES Determination, watching Kepler 442b shrink in the viewports as they headed for home. The mining station had been declared a neutral research facility. The workers had been relocated to better positions, and Kethvar had requested transfer to work with human operations. "So," Sarah said as they stood in the observation lounge, "want to tell me how you managed to turn a simple job dispute into an interspecies incident?" Marcus scratched behind Rex's ears and smiled. "Someone threatened my family. I responded appropriately." "Appropriately?" Sarah laughed. "Marcus, you held an entire star system hostage with a modified fusion reactor and a German shepherd. Like I said, appropriate response." Sarah shook her head in amazement. "You know, the diplomatic corps is going to be analyzing this incident for decades. They're calling it the Rex Doctrine, the principle that humans will go to any length to protect their family members, including non-human companions." "Sound about right," Marcus said. Rex barked once, as if agreeing, and they all laughed. As the ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying them home to Earth, Marcus reflected on what he'd learned. The universe was vast and often hostile, filled with species that didn't understand human values or human bonds. But sometimes, if you were willing to take a stand for what mattered most, you could make them understand. Sometimes protecting one dog was worth changing the galaxy. Rex wagged his tail and settled down for the long journey home, content in the knowledge that his human would always keep him safe. And in the end, Marcus thought that was the only thing that really mattered. The morning sun cast long shadows across the mining station on Kepler 442b as Marcus Chun walked the perimeter with his faithful companion, Rex. The German shepherd mix bounded through the red dust, his tail wagging as he chased the strange butterfly-like creatures that fluttered around the communication arrays. Marcus smiled, watching his four-legged friend find joy in this desolate place that had been their home for 3 years. "Come on, boy," Marcus called, patting his leg. Rex immediately trotted back, his tongue hanging out happily. The dog had been Marcus's only real companion since arriving at Mining Station Theta 7, one of humanity's most remote outposts in the Kepler system. The other human workers had rotated out months ago, leaving Marcus as the sole human supervisor overseeing the automated mining operations and the small crew of alien workers. The Zephyrians were decent enough beings to work with. They looked like tall, slender humanoids with pale blue skin and large black eyes that seemed to absorb everything around them. They were efficient workers, rarely complained, and kept to themselves. Their leader, Kethvar, had even learned some basic English to communicate with Marcus. But they didn't understand the bond between a human and his dog. Rex had arrived on the last supply ship 6 months ago, a gift from Marcus's sister back on Earth who knew how isolated he'd become. The dog had quickly adapted to the lower gravity and thinner atmosphere of Kepler 442b, though Marcus had to keep him on supplements to maintain his health. Rex wore a special collar that monitored his vital signs and provided a small atmospheric enhancement field around his head. As they completed their morning rounds, Marcus noticed something different. The Zephyrians were gathered in small groups, speaking in their musical language that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Their usual work patterns seemed disrupted, and there was a tension in the air that Marcus couldn't quite identify. Kethvar approached, his movements more rigid than usual. "Human Marcus," he said in his careful English. "There is a situation requiring discussion." "What kind of situation?" Marcus asked, Rex sitting obediently beside him. "Ship arrives yesterday night. Different Zephyrians from homeworld. They speak of new orders." Kethvar's large eyes seemed troubled. "Orders about animals." Marcus felt a cold chill run down his spine. "What about animals?" "On homeworld, animals serve purpose. Food, work, resources. They say keeping animal for emotion is primitive, wasteful of resources." Kethvar glanced down at Rex, who looked up at him with curious brown eyes. "They say dog must be processed." "Processed?" Marcus's voice rose. "You mean killed? They use word harvested." "Say dog meat, is nutritious. Say emotional attachment is weakness that makes humans unreliable workers. Kethvar's voice dropped. I tell them this is human custom, but they say customs must change for greater efficiency. Marcus knelt down and put his arm around Rex, feeling the dog's warm, solid presence. Rex leaned into him, sensing his distress. The thought of anyone harming his companion made Marcus's blood run hot. He'd been alone out here for so long that Rex wasn't just a pet, he was family. Who are these new Zephyrians? Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice level. Administrative Council from Homeworld. They inspect all outer colonies, make new rules for better productivity. They arrive with enforcement team. Kitvar lukid uncomfortable. They have authority over all non-Zephyrian workers in this sector. Marcus stood slowly, his mind racing. The Zephyrian Collective had a mutual cooperation agreement with humanity, but humans were definitely the junior partners in the relationship. Earth needed the rare minerals that could only be efficiently mined in this system, and the Zephyrians had the technology and infrastructure to make it possible. Human workers like Marcus were valuable, but replaceable. When do they want to harvest him? Marcus asked, the word tasting bitter in his mouth. Today, sunset ceremony. They say quick death honors the animal service. Kitvar pos. I am sorry, human Marcus. I speak against this, but my voice is small. Marcus looked around the mining station that had been his world for 3 years. The main compound consisted of several connected domes housing living quarters, equipment bays, and processing facilities. Beyond that, the automated mining rigs worked tirelessly, pulling precious metals from the planet's crust. It was efficient, isolated, and about to become a nightmare. What if I refuse? Marcus asked. Kethvar's expression darkened. Administrative Council has enforcement team. Armed. They say resistance will result in termination of human contract and immediate deportation. Or worse, if deemed threat to operation. Marcus felt Rex press closer to his leg, the dog's instincts picking up on the tension. He scratched behind Rex's ears, thinking furiously. There had to be options. He was a human supervisor, responsible for maintaining the complex equipment that the Zephyrians couldn't operate. Surely that gave him some leverage. I need to speak with these administrators, Marcus said finally. They wait in main dome. But, human Marcus, Ketvar hesitated. They are not like local Zephyrians. They are different, more rigid. They see efficiency as highest virtue, emotion as weakness. Be careful with words. Marcus nodded and headed toward the main dome with Rex at his side. As they walked, he thought about his options. The next supply ship wasn't due for 6 weeks. Even if he could somehow get a message to Earth, help wouldn't arrive for months. He was truly alone out here with nothing but his wits and his determination to protect his friend. The main dome's entrance hissed open, and Marcus stepped inside to find 5 Zephyrians he'd never seen before standing around the central holographic display that showed the mining operation status. These aliens were different from the workers Marcus had grown accustomed to. They wore form-fitting dark uniforms instead of the loose work clothes, and their posture was more aggressive, more military. The one in the center turned to face Marcus. This Zephyrian was taller than the others, with intricate scarring around his large eyes that marked him as high-ranking. When he spoke, his English was perfect, without the halting cadence that Kethvar used. Human Supervisor Marcus Chun, the administrator said in a voice like ice crystals. I am Subcoordinator Veltar of the Administrative Council. We have reviewed your work performance and found it satisfactory. However, there are inefficiencies in your personal conduct that must be addressed. Such as, Marcus asked, keeping his voice steady. The animal, Veltar gestured dismissively toward Rex. Emotional attachments compromise decision-making ability. Resources allocated to non-productive biological entities reduce overall efficiency. The animal will be processed at sunset, and its nutritional value will be distributed among the workforce. Marcus felt his jaw clench. Rex isn't just an animal. He's my companion. Humans form bonds with dogs that improve our psychological well-being and work performance. Psychological well-being is irrelevant if productivity remains stable, Veltar replied coldly. We have observed human workers for 17 cycles. Those with emotional attachments to animals show decreased adaptability and increased resistance to necessary changes. The attachment is a weakness. And what if I refuse? Marcus asked. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The 4 other administrators moved slightly, and Marcus noticed they all wore what looked like energy weapons on their belts. Refusal will result in immediate termination of employment and deportation to Earth. The animal will still be processed, as it cannot survive transport and represents a biological hazard to ship systems. Veltar stepped closer, his large black eyes reflecting Marcus like dark mirrors. Additionally, refusal to comply with Administrative Council directives will result in negative performance ratings that will prevent future employment in collective territories. Marcus realized he was being backed into a corner. Earth's economy depended heavily on the rare metals from this system. A negative rating from the Zephyrian Collective could effectively end his career and make it impossible for him to support his family back home. But the thought of letting them kill Rex made his blood boil. I need time to consider, Marcus said. Time is a luxury that reduces efficiency, Veltar replied. You have until sunset to make arrangements. We suggest using the time to increase productivity rather than dwelling on inevitable outcomes. Marcus turned and walked out of the dome, Rex following faithfully beside him. Once they were outside, he knelt down and looked into his companion's trusting brown eyes. I won't let them hurt you, boy, he whispered, scratching Rex behind the ears. I promise. But as he looked around at the isolated mining station, surrounded by alien workers and watched by armed administrators, Marcus realized he had no idea how he was going to keep that promise. The sun was already past its zenith, meaning he had perhaps 6 hours before sunset. 6 hours to figure out how to save his best friend's life on a hostile planet where he was outnumbered, outgunned, and completely alone. Rex wagged his tail and licked Marcus's face, oblivious to the danger. The simple trust in the dog's eyes only strengthened Marcus's resolve. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, he would not let them take Rex from him. As they walked back toward the living quarters, Marcus began to form the outline of a plan. It was desperate and probably suicidal, but it was better than doing nothing. The Zephyrians might think they understood humans, but they were about to learn something new. They were about to discover what happened when someone threatened a human's family.